How did your views on the pandemic evolve during 2020, the first year of the pandemic?
Yeah, well, so at the very outset, I think, going along with the crowds. I was absolutely paying attention to what was happening, and I was scared by what was happening. And even when things started to sort of, we started to get a bit more information, we had the Diamond Princess situation. So I started to be a bit less scared for me as an individual, but I was still scared for, the older people that I loved, and the society as a whole, and the NHS might collapse. All of that story was still a concern to me. And really that carried on right up until the summertime. So it wasn't until summer 2020 when, the spring wave had ended, and we were still getting this peculiar trickle of cases and deaths every day being reported as if it was all the same as what had gone before. And I was sort of questioning that, but not able to really look into it because I had 4 children and it was summer holidays. And so it wasn't until they went back to school that I thought, right, I'm going to dig out some data on this because I want to understand it better. And the question I had was this trickle of cases just testing errors? Because, as a diagnostic testing expert, that's always a risk you've got with medical testing. You might overdiagnose or underdiagnose, and you've always got to try and get that balance right. And this looked like overdiagnoses. And, you can say that, but you need to prove it. You can't just sort of make that claim. And I thought, well, there will be ways to prove it, because what happened in spring 2020 was kind of characteristic. There were certain people who were more at risk. So you had men died more than women, and black people were more at risk of being in ICU than white people. And, there were sort of all these different signals that were risk factors for COVID deaths and COVID hospitalizations that you could pick out and say, well, does it still look like that now? And so in the summertime, it didn't anymore. The summer it was equal numbers of men and women, and that the pattern had changed. And so even if there were some genuine COVID, knocking around, which is impossible, the bigger picture story at that time was that we were overdiagnosing it. And so having shown that, I thought, well, what do I do about this? Because, I think this is important, and I don't know how to, or who to tell, or how to do something. I don't want to just have it ignored. And I took advice from Carl Hennigan, who's a director of the Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine in Oxford, who I was actually at medical school with. And I hadn't been in touch with him for 20 years, but, I knew him. And I asked him what I should do, and he said, well, just write a blog and say it. Put it out there, and then people will know it's been said, and if it's in the public domain, then it can't be ignored in the same way. So I reluctantly took a photograph and set up a social media thing, which all of that stuff I hate, but I did it and put my name on it and put my face on it and said, I think we've got a problem here. And I was anticipating one of 2 responses rather naively. I thought either I'm going to be told, well, you're wrong, we've looked at this is actually what's going on and here's why. Or they'd say, oh, that's interesting, we hadn't seen that, we'll see what we can do about it. And I genuinely thought those were the 2 outcomes. And that's not what happened. I just got attacked. And then also introduced to all sorts of other experts who had had a similar experience when they'd raised a concern, which sort of opened my eyes a little bit to there might be more to this than just my little concern. And so I started reading about it all in much more depth and learning about things that I'd been oblivious about that happened in spring.
Mm-hmm. So being brought up in a life, in a culture where it was allowed to give a point of view and to give some counter argument and to discuss and to work through the dialectic of scientific development. This is how science works. We discuss, we debate, all that seemed to be gone. Your ideas weren't scientifically refuted or scientifically confirmed. It was rather that you were attacked personally. There seems to have been this huge, what I can only call a massive cultural change, really.
Yeah, and I think that there was probably, I don't know exactly what was behind it. I don't know who these people were, but there have been times along the way when it's clear that some of the people who've been causing trouble and attacking people and trying to discredit them have been funded by outside funders. So it's not just individuals who've got a chip on their shoulder. I think sometimes it's that, but sometimes there's more to it than that. And And that's just really, really telling. And obviously that's no way to like have a civil society. It's no way to do science, and it's no way to do politics. Like, you have to actually work on the evidence and argue the cases with facts. And if you are immediately having to go for personal attacks, it's because you haven't got an argument. If you've got the truth on your side, then you just expose it. And there's something quite interesting that I've learned along this way around the difference between a truth and a lie. And so under a lie, I'd include, misinterpretations and mistakes and whatever else. And obviously I've made mistakes along the way. When I make a mistake, it goes everywhere. Everybody wants to share it. They want to use it to discredit me. They want to use it so they can show how clever they are, because they can show that I was wrong. But most of the things I've said have not been like that. They have been inconvenient truths. And when you say an inconvenient truth, that doesn't happen. You just get attacked.
And I don't want to dwell on this, but I've had, quite serious physical threats from untraceable emails and things like that. There's a real concerted effort against what I would call open discussion. And anyway, let's get on to some really interesting material from your book.